Hello and welcome back to the Fit 40 podcast, where we simplify exercise and nutrition for busy parents 40 plus so they can improve their health and feel amazing. I'm your host, Brian Fitzsimmons, certified personal trainer and nutrition coach for people over 40 since 2015. And today we have episode 3 of the Fit for TV, the reality of the Biggest Loser documentary on Netflix. As a personal trainer and nutrition coach, give my reactions just on my notes that I took throughout this entire documentary, because there's a lot of awesome topics that we need to bring up, and it'll make for a great conversation and allow you to get some practical tips to apply to your journey if you are trying to lose weight or just get in shape and get fit and improve in any of those aspects. All right. But before we dive into this episode, make sure that if you aren't already, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, so that way you do not miss another episode. Because even though this is the final of this series, I got so many more episodes coming. We are well into the mid 300s, and you better believe I'm going to keep this going until we get to like at least the 1,000 mark, if not more. So a lot more coming your way. Now, let's talk about episode 3. So this one kicked off with a woman basically flashing to get on the show for her audition tape. So a woman who basically just took the trench coat and popped it open, was wearing a bikini, and you're just like, oh, okay then. And this is indicative of the type of people that they wanted on the show, people that were not shy, because they made them take their t-shirt off for every single weigh-in, because they were going for that wow factor of like, oh my God, like somebody looks like that. Like they basically wanted to shame these people, which is a consistent theme that you've heard me talk about the past 2 times. And also they wanted to showcase the differences, because they keep showing that before picture and what they look like in that moment. So that also could have been the reason for that. And if that's the case, that can be good motivation for someone who is interested in losing body fat, because progress pictures do help, because you can see where you started. It's so common that when people are on a fat loss journey, they look in the mirror day after day after day and they're like, no change, no change. Why the hell am I even doing this? But then you look back on an old picture and you're like, whoa, I don't even recognize that person. And that's because our eyes deceive us and they adjust with these little changes that happen day to day to day. So having some sort of metrics that you rely on, whether that is progress pictures or like circumference measurements or body weight, that stuff does help paint the picture that, hey, you're moving in a direction where you want to move, even though your eyes are not giving you that satisfaction or that fulfillment. And that's a good reason to not really rely on the mirror when you're gauging your progress. It's just not unbiased. It's very, very biased. You see yourself every single day and you take it for granted. It just happens across the board. So something that you could apply to your own journey. And also this is something that you see very common when it comes to people exposing their bodies. They'll use a lot of companies will use progress pictures for marketing. And this is just something I never really got on board with. I never felt good doing. It's like, hey, I know you trusted me with these pictures and you were borderline mortified taking them of yourself, let alone me like putting it out to the masses. So can I use that and just use it for my marketing so I can show people how they can not look like that? That's just something gross about that. And I know some people use progress pictures and they cover faces and everything, which, yeah, to each their own. And as long as those people are okay with it, but just my personal way of doing things, I just never, it always felt exploitative and just gross. And also I wanted to take this in the direction of like posting in general for accountability, because when people start their fitness journey, a lot of times they'll start an account on Instagram that's devoted to them losing the weight, because you've seen so many people do that over the years who have gotten big followings, gotten money from doing that and things like that. And a lot of people do go at this with the genuine intention of, this is going to hold me accountable. But unfortunately, that's not always the best case scenario for a couple of reasons. Number one is people suck online. And you saw this with Tracy, for example, when she went on Jay Leno, they show her getting all this hate. Like, if you're going to put yourself out there online, it doesn't always go well if you don't have the thickest of skin, because people say messed up stuff because they're miserable. They're losers. They just have nothing better going on with their lives, and they want to tear you down because they want to troll you and make themselves laugh, or they want to take out their own frustrations in their own life on you. And if that's going to potentially derail you, that could be one of the worst things that you could possibly do. So just something to consider if you are thinking about that, if you're jumping into something and you're like, I'm going to post all the time for accountability, I'm going to post all like my body all over the place, then just know that that could come with that territory. So you really have to weigh the pros and cons of that. That's why when it comes to posting in general for like my clients and the challenges that we do, I love when people take screenshots of what they did, not like gym selfies or them working out. It's what kind of progress did we make? Were we lifting more weights? Were we doing more repetitions, run further? Or the app that I use called Everfit for the clients, like, it'll equate it to certain things like you just lifted, like today I lifted 72 roosters, or I had a client the other week who like ran the length of the Golden Gate Bridge. Stuff like that is really cool to showcase because it's more about performance rather than, hey, I look this way because I'm like putting myself out there. So that could be a way that you could post in a positive way because a lot of people won't really talk shit on the fact that you lifted a certain amount of weight. But if you post yourself lifting that weight, they'll be like, oh, well, your form isn't good. Or if you post a gym selfie, they'll say something like, oh, looks like you got a long way to go or something like that along those lines. And it could just derail you. So let's not let that happen. And let's put you in a position where you could have the most success and have a really positive journey. All right. And then I did put a couple more notes here about Tracy getting hate online. And like I said, a lot of the people that say these things, like the one person said, like, if I saw or if I hit you with my car accidentally, I'd keep driving or something along those lines. Like these people have some problems. Like they really have some issues. And at the end of the day, I think it always helps to come at it. If you've ever experienced this online, it always helps to come at it with the frame of reference of you don't always know somebody's mental health. You don't always know what's going on in people's lives. And you also don't know if it's just some shithead teenager that doesn't know anything about anything yet and they're voicing their opinion because that's what most of social media is. Um, and along with that, there might be some bad edits with Tracy in particular, or maybe even others in the episode as well. Sometimes the producers will paint people in a certain light to make sure that they drive an emotional reaction from the audience because again, this is a TV show. It is not a health journey. It's not the best way to do this. It's what can we do to rile people up and get them to watch. And when this happens, humanity can sometimes get lost because I know I've been guilty of this too, like judging people online from a little snippet that I see. We all do it. And we got to bring ourselves back a little bit sometimes and say, hey, what is going on here? Like, we do not know everything about this person. We don't know their entire situation. And it's so easy to throw stones. Now, as I am saying all of this and throwing stones at Jillian and Bob and this whole crew, sometimes it is deserved based on specific actions and repeated actions, like in the case of Bob and Jillian and the producers. But if it's this person that we've never seen before, we don't have no exposure to, and they do one thing or two things that we're like, yeah, they're horrible. Like, yeah, it's probably worth digging in a little bit more and seeing maybe they just got a bad deal or a bad edit. Um, and I know that I think it might have been Tracy that said I went on this show to get healthy. And like I just said, you need to know what you're getting into when it comes to setting expectations. And it's not just about them going on the show to get healthy and it turned out to be the total opposite. Expectation setting applies in every journey that you are on. And when it comes to like weight loss, for example, you want to make sure that you are going at this with the right intentions, with the right expectations lined up. So if you're saying, hey, I'm going to lose 20 or 30 pounds in this 1 month, you're setting yourself up for failure because now you're setting the bar so high that it's unattainable. And when you don't achieve that, you're going to feed into this cycle of, yeah, I suck. Yeah, I'm just not good enough. I'm not disciplined enough. I don't want it enough. And then you have these trainers on this show saying, yeah, you don't want it enough. You're not disciplined. And then it makes you get stuck in this situation where you're like, I don't have the power to change. And I've proven to myself over and over and over again that I can't. When in reality, you do have the power to change. We just have the wrong mindset around this. You just need to lower that bar a little bit and hit that bar over and over and over again. And that stacks up and that builds over time. But if you keep setting that bar so high, you're never going to be able to get to that place. So just a little note on expectation setting. And also this brings up something that came up recently. This past week, I was talking with my clients about an interesting concept, and I'm going to pull it up here. I know I have my notes right here. It's called the Stockdale paradox. And what that is, it's a theory based around Admiral James Stockdale, who was a United States Navy or a U.S. Navy officer who was held as a prisoner in war in Vietnam for over 7 years. And this idea that they named the Stockdale paradox is basically the ability to balance two things: unwavering faith and brutal honesty. Because they noticed that when these guys were being held in these camps and they were prisoners of war, the guys that never seemed to make it were the ones that had these expectations of, we're going to be out by Christmas, or next week is the week that we're out. And over again, those expectations were not met. And it just killed their optimism. And it eventually led them to not being able to make it. But the consistency in the people that did make it all the way and got out of these camps and got back to their families are those people that balance the reality of, hey, we're in a really shitty situation. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, and this is just what it is, and we got to deal with it. But that was followed with, but we're getting out of here. It's going to happen. We just got to get through this and make it happen. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here, where it's like, don't set these grand expectations like we're going to be out by Christmas, or I'm losing this 20 pounds by this date, or it's a total failure. Because if you fail to meet those expectations, you consider yourself a failure for not doing that. And that creates a negative spiral that gets us to a place where we give up, or in their case, like didn't make it. So don't be one of those people. Okay. Know that, hey, the work is going to be required. You're going to need to work hard, and it's going to be this thing that you do over and over and over again. But as long as you keep doing those things, even if the timeline doesn't match, you are still going to get there. All right. What else did I have here? Oh, also the note about the producer saying, we want you to gain more weight, to, I think it was Stacy. So she ended up binging the whole night before they got there, because it's shocking that somebody who might struggle with binge eating disorder, or just binge eating in general, when they get anxious, they binge. Wild concept. Not exactly the best thing to do for somebody who struggles with that and wants to get better and get on this show to get healthier. But hey, whatever. I'm just making comments about what professionals should have been doing on this show in the first place. But the whole goal of this, like I mentioned in the previous episode, is to manipulate that initial weigh-in, to get a big drop on that first one and get people excited and to drive the intensity of the show. And just so you know, because I put this as a little tidbit to mention here, this is done with this manipulation with the initial weigh-in. There's also things that are done, manipulation tactics that are done with progress pictures that you see online, or maybe even on this show, that have happened. Like, for example, some people will get in incredible shape for a photo shoot, take those photos, and then once they're done with that, they wipe all the oil off, take a shower, whatever. They go have a big old meal, and they get really bloated and distended from that meal. And then when they come back, they take pictures, but this time the lighting's a little bit different. There's not as much light on them. It's a little bit darker, and they don't have the same background, which makes them look a little bit bigger and not as shredded and not as toned. And guess what? They use that as the before picture. So just know, when it comes to things like the progress pictures you see online, they can be manipulated, and a lot of times they are. So don't let that guide your expectations of, oh, I should be able to achieve this, because they didn't even achieve that. Okay. Only go off of what your body tells you and what your journey is like, and getting better each day along that journey based on your individual feedback, not looking at somebody else and being like, oh, I want that, I'm going to do what they do. No, this is your journey. You do what you need to do. And then the other thing I had after this was the interesting college course that the doctor who they showcased on there, she struggled with her weight. I believe she was a contestant to, when she was in a college course, they basically showed all these doctors pornography because they wanted them to feel comfortable with different types of sex, because they would have patients that would be coming from all different walks of life. And they showed two obese people doing the dirty, and somebody in her class, a guy who was relatively in shape, made a comment about that, like being gross. And this goes back to the point I made prior in episode 2 about these little comments. Like, you really want to be conscious of this type of stuff, because I'm going to talk about this later in this episode about kids as young as 10 going to Weight Watchers meetings and stuff and hearing ladies rip their bodies apart. But even these little comments from coaches who are like, I know I was talking to somebody and they heard a comment from their coach that basically said, "Oh, I don't think you're a medium. I'm pretty sure you're a large." Okay, something like that. Or a parent being like, "You sure you want to eat all that?" Or a family member being like, "Oh, it looks like you've gained weight since the last time I've seen you." Like, these comments that they don't think are a big deal make a huge difference in how people see themselves and how they react to those things. Because when we see ourselves in a certain way, we put a label on our chest that says, "I am this," and we act in accordance with that label. That's what labeling theory is, for anybody who's unfamiliar with it. And I learned about it in my criminology classes, because when people were labeled as deviants or labeled as criminals, they acted more like criminals. But when they were labeled as something else, they acted in accordance with that. And one study that comes to mind is when they took a high school and they basically were testing to see if the belief in the teacher messed or affected their test scores. And they took all these kids that are in honors, that are average, and that are in the remedial classes, and mixed them all up and told the teachers, "Hey, you have the honors class, you have the remedial class." And when it came to those students, it was an even mix between the two classes. It wasn't honors and remedial. And this teacher who was doing the honors class said, "Okay," or they basically they didn't say anything. I don't know where I was going with that, but they treated them like they were honor students. And then the teacher that thought they were teaching the remedial students taught them like they were remedial students. And guess what? This test scores were reflected in that same way. The kids who were the honors kids in the remedial course tested worse than the kids who were in the honors class that were honor students, and vice versa. With the kids that were remedial in the honors courses, they got better test scores than the kids who were remedial in remedial courses. So even when we're putting labels on other people, we treat them a little bit differently, and that feeds into how they label themselves, and then they act in accordance with that. So this is all to say, be careful with the labels that you give yourself and that you give others based on your comments, and to not only them, but also to yourself. This is a really big thing when it comes to self-talk. When you say, "Hey, you're a piece of shit because you ate this food," then you're labeling yourself as a piece of shit. So you're going to act in accordance with that. Whereas if you flip the script and you say, "Hey, I ate this food, but you know what? I didn't put myself in the best situation. I bought it at the grocery store, so I won't do that next time. And I'll get this as a substitute to eat this instead, because I know it's going to leave me more filled up and it's going to leave me feeling better energy wise." And you go at it with that frame of reference of, "Hey, it happened. I'm going to fix it and we're going to get better going forward." That's the stuff that's going to serve you so much better later in life and as you go along this journey. Um, and then along with that was the comment, or not even the comment. They made a woman who was an NYPD officer weigh in front of her entire class. She's like one of the few, if not the only female in the entire thing. And she's weighing in front of a bunch of guys. Talk about mortifying, humiliating. And at this point should be freaking illegal. Like, I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but whoever her, I guess, sergeant was, or whatever their rank was, total jackass and clueless. And this speaks to the fact that they really need professionals in these certain instances when it comes to weight and when it comes to people's health. You need people who are professionals so that this shit doesn't happen. So the next thing I had in my notes was the NIH study that they referenced, that they ran on these contestants. They measured, okay, what exactly is going on in their bodies after this dramatic transformation. So for anybody who's unfamiliar, the NIH is the government associate, or the government organization we have that donates or dedicates a lot of money towards understanding things that affect our health. And it is now, next thing in my notes is the NIH study they conducted on the former contestants. Now, for anybody who's not familiar, the NIH is the National Institute of Health, and it is basically what our government puts a ton of money into understanding, or basically conducting research on things that affect our health. So this one was conducted in 2016, and basically a long-term follow-up in obesity. 2016 tracked 14 participants from season 8 and found 6 years post-show resting metabolic rate, which is your RMR, or also referred to as your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, remained significantly lower by about 500 calories a day than expected based on body composition and age. Now, those with the greatest long-term weight loss also exhibited the largest metabolic slowdowns, contrary to what many expected. Now, basically, when it comes to this in particular, this study, you really can't take that at face value because number one, that's a very small sample size and very extreme conditions because only 14 people is like nothing. Okay. If they took every participant that ever was on the show, then yeah, that might hold a little bit of weight. But to put it in perspective, for pharmaceutical drugs, sample sizes, people that will take those meds to see what the effectiveness is would be in the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions. And here we have 14. Okay. So not a whole lot that we can draw from that. And there were some people that weighed in that were experts in this field that had some ideas as to what was going on. Like Kevin Hall, for example, he's like the GOAT, the guy when it comes to body composition changes and how calories affect our bodies when we're in a deficit, when we're in a surplus, when we're in maintenance. Like he is the guy that runs a lot of the stuff as far as like what calories do. And he proposed a constrained energy expenditure model. God, can't talk now. Basically saying that, hey, our body will compensate in different ways due to different factors. So he suggested that because contestants engaged in sustained heavy activity, their bodies compensated by slowing their metabolism down to keep overall energy use in check. So this goes to the thing that happens. So basically what this is saying is that your body will slow down your metabolism, but this doesn't mean that you're doing all the same things and you're living your life exactly the same and your body is just not doing its job. No, it will slow you down in ways like it'll stop you from moving your hands as much, like non-exercise activity, things that are motion, but it's not intentional exercise. You're not going to get up from the couch to go turn the lights off because you're so tired, or you're not going to opt for taking the stairs at work because you just don't feel like it because you don't have the energy to do it, or you're just not going to tap your foot at your desk because you don't even have the energy to do something as simple as that. And that will reduce. Along with that, when you eat less food, you're not going to experience as much thermic effective food when let me back up a sec. Thermic effective food is the amount of calories you burn when you consume, digest, and excrete food. So you're not doing that as frequently because you're not eating as much. So you're not burning as many calories that way. And when you are operating on less calories, you don't have as much energy to put towards your exercise. And if you're not able to continuously push and get heavier weight, more reps, and things like that, and you may even see performance come down a little bit, that could be because you are losing lean body mass and you are not seeing positive results because you're under fueling, which now if you have less body mass, now you not just fat mass, but less lean body mass, now you're not burning as many calories because that amount of calories you would have burned from that muscle tissue is now not at that same level it otherwise would have been. And along with all this going on, metabolic adaptation is something that happens when you lose weight. And this doesn't get talked about enough because when you lose a lot of weight, your body no longer requires that amount of calories to maintain that weight. That's why when we're in a calorie deficit, we lose all of this weight because we're not giving our body the fuel that it needs. But when you come back to maintenance, your maintenance at say 200 pounds would be different than 300 pounds because you don't need to maintain that extra 100 pounds. And when it comes to the raw numbers, you could look at something like a BMR calculator online. Are they perfect? No, but this kind of helps to paint the picture. So let's say we have a male who's 40, who's about 5'10", and they're 400 pounds. Their BMR would be roughly about 2,700 calories. Okay, so let's say they lose 200 pounds like they did on this show. Okay, now that same male who's 40, who's 5'10", who's 200 pounds, now their resting metabolic rate is about 1,800. That's 900 calories of difference. So now, being that these contestants, when they measured them, said that they were, what was about 500 calories a day less, you can make an argument that they actually were better off because they were probably maintaining a lot of muscle mass due to their exercise levels, and they were eating relatively good foods, even though they weren't like super high calorie and nowhere near the amount of calories that they needed. So being that study found that they were reducing their resting metabolic rate by about 500 calories per day. That's actually better than if you were to just estimate it and somebody loses about 900 calories per day. And this can be really challenging in general, just like losing that many calories that you're able to burn without really having to do anything, because people will use these numbers and justify, oh, I can have this extra treat, or I can do this. And now they can no longer do that. And that is really where we want to dive into, which is number one, why are we having these foods at these amounts? And why are we craving them in at certain times or in these quantities? And we want to understand like what is driving this calorie number up that is causing the weight regain. And that's usually things like self-sabotaging behaviors, which brings me to my next one. Okay, this is basically my little list of all the things that could have been done differently, and maybe you can get ahead of on your journey to make sure that this doesn't happen to you, where you unnecessarily lose lean body mass and put yourself in a position where you're moving less, so that you end up not losing any more weight, or you possibly regain weight. So first off, you need to lose sustainably. If you try and play the game of how few calories can I lose, that will result in losing lean muscle tissue, possibly dipping into bone mineral density, and putting you in a position now where you're burning less calories, but also you're more frail. And that is not good either. Okay. And along with that, they never really experienced what a reverse diet or a maintenance phase looked like. Because if you, at some point during your journey, don't experience what it feels like to keep your weight stagnant, not up or down, which unfortunately, I really think that's the biggest issue when it comes to the obesity epidemic here, which is diet culture, where you're either losing or gaining, losing or gaining. There's no maintaining where you're at. You need to understand what your body requires to chill, to just be where it's at, and how raising your calories slowly can help you do that. But you got to understand what you're doing. You need to understand that, hey, introducing calories slowly can allow you to eat a ton of food and maintain where you're at. But a lot of people straight up just don't believe that, or they add way too much way too soon. So they get excess body fat when they raise their calories, and they're like, oh, I can't maintain this. And you're just like, well, you're not doing it right. So you don't really get to say that. Okay. And they didn't really work on the mental stuff like they thought they were. Again, they were doing that pseudoscience bullshit where Bob and Jillian were like giving them this spiel and this moody talk, and it was great for TV, but they never really worked on things like all in versus all out. They actually reinforced that, basically saying, if you don't hit all of our standards all the way up here, then it's not good enough. You're a total failure and you're all out. You're totally off the plan. When it comes to long-term change, you need a all or something rather than an all or nothing mindset. And that something was reinforced over and over again as not good enough. And also, they were shaming bad foods. They literally had these refrigerators full of all their favorite foods, and they created this dichotomy of good and bad foods. There's no such thing as a good or bad food. All that matters when it comes to food is the amount of nutrients that you get in it and all the other factors that it gives you. So is it nutrient deficient or nutrient rich? Does it provide you an emotional connection? Like sometimes there's a cultural connection to foods, or a family connection. Like I always bring up the example of me with my grandmother's meatballs. I don't just eat a meatball and say the way that she cooked them and say, yeah, that's a good meatball. It brings back memories. It brings back a lot of stuff. So this is why we don't want to fall into the trap of good, bad. No, it's not that simple. Let's stop making this into something where it's like you just eat this one thing or you just eat that thing. It's everything together. We just need to understand how to get the portions right, how to balance everything out, because you can have whatever you want. It's just a matter of how much. Also, the relationship with exercise, because this whole time they were just exercising to burn that 6,000 calories. And when you only exercise to burn calories, it's extremely negative. It's not motivating, and it makes you not want to keep coming back. So now you're not going to consistently exercise, and consistent exercise is one of the biggest factors when it comes to long-term weight loss, keeping it off for the rest of your life. And then defining failure too, like I said in the beginning with the all in, all out, it was this constant, you're failing or you're succeeding, you're failing or you're succeeding. There's never, oh, well, this didn't go according to plan, but you did this and this and this really well. Let's keep that and then work on this, this, and this. This productive conversation never happened. It was always, hey, you just got to get your mind right to make sure that you do all of the things all of the time. Because if you don't, then You just don't want it enough. Okay. And also not finding victories outside of the scale. The scale focus might have been the most detrimental thing to this entire show for all of America's mental health, really, because it became this thing where if you didn't see a drastic number in the scale when it came to the scale going down, then what's the point? What are we even doing this for? That's the whole purpose. We want to see the scale go down. The scale is all that matters. No, the scale is like the last thing that matters if you really want to lose body fat. And I can tell you this after years and years of training people and showing them how to do it in a sustainable way. Sometimes the scale just doesn't agree with you. Okay. There was an instance where the woman Janelle didn't lose a single pound, but I will bet any amount of money that she did lose body fat, but she probably built muscle as well, because a lot of these people were a very young training age. And what a training age is compared to biological age, training age is how long you've actually stuck to a structured strength training program where you progressively add weight and reps and difficulty. And when you do that, you build muscle at an accelerated rate compared to somebody who is a seasoned professional, like a pro athlete. And that gets back to one of the comments that Dr. H made, where he told the producers, he's like, listen, they could probably lose, like they were gauging how much weight could they possibly lose realistically. And he's like, probably about like 3 to 4 pounds. And then he goes, but when you introduce exercise, that's where it really changes things. But he's coming at this from a perspective of training people or treating people on the Los Angeles Raiders National Football League team. Okay, these are professional athletes. They are at a point where they're not making these dramatic increases in their lean body mass, their muscle mass. And when they exercise extra, it does result in burning a bunch of body fat because they are almost borderline capped out on how much muscle that they can build. But when you're on the opposite end of that spectrum and you get what is referred to as newbie gains, you get a lot of muscle pretty fast, which is a great thing. And in actuality, it makes you smaller because when we compare a pound of fat to a pound of muscle, a pound of fat takes up more space than a pound of muscle does because it's more dense, like muscle's more dense compared to fat. So she was probably smaller on that scale, but because it showed 0, everybody's like, you suck. You are a failure. Oh my God. And it just reinforced this feeling that the scale is the end all be all, which is not the case. And the cherry on top of all of that is some of these people unfortunately did develop eating disorders. And that is very common in places like Hollywood, which is where Bob and Jillian were cutting their teeth training people to get to these extremes. Because when you flirt with extremes, stuff like this can happen. It happens a lot, like in bodybuilding, for example. People will do bodybuilding shows with the wrong intentions because they're like, oh, this is a way to control my food, or they're seeking control elsewhere and they're using food and exercise to do it. And it becomes this disordered relationship. And then all of a sudden, now they have a full blown eating disorder, even though they're like, oh, I'm doing this healthy thing. No, sometimes that's not how it goes. So the intentions behind all of this and understanding the why behind everything is so, so important. And it just wasn't done for a lot of these people. And you see these extremes causing the rapid weight gain in people, like I believe it was Stacy, where she said, I was starving myself and put 20 pounds back on immediately. And that's pretty much what you see when you see fighters like MMA, boxers, anybody in a weight controlled category. When they cut weight, they go right off of the scale and go pound like a bunch of bagels or pizza or whatever, because they want to put the weight back on that they know is going to serve them in the fight and provide fuel for them. But they're like 20 pounds heavier on fight night. Okay, that happens very frequently and it's intentional. But when you do this in this scenario with this show, they're using these weight cutting strategies because they're trying to drive that scale down for the show. They're seeing this and they're like not educated on the fact that, hey, this will happen when you go back to a normal style of eating. And along with that, she said something along the lines of like, she felt like crap for a few days and then immediately she got back into the swing of things, or she hit the pavement and was doing 8 hours of exercise. That is not sustainable. That is not something that you can do all the time. And number one, not get injured. Like that is a lot of activity, and it's eventually going to result in things like stress fractures or bursitis or tendonitis and things like that that come from overuse. That's just something waiting, like something bad waiting to happen. And this gets into the concept of the aftercare program, which I know it said in the documentary that they were asking for. A lot of them were like, is there some sort of aftercare program to show us how to keep this weight off? And they didn't offer it because they didn't know how to do it. There's no way that they knew exactly what it would require. And to be fair, back in those days, we didn't have the extensive knowledge that we do now around things like people's metabolisms and what it takes to keep the weight off, because when they show the obesity numbers that I'm going to show at the end, clearly this hasn't gotten better over the years. Like, we were operating with not enough information and not enough practical information and good information being pushed out to the masses. So there really wasn't anything for them to send them to. And unless you basically say, I'm going to do the same thing and just keep doing what I'm doing, in which case we see how that ends. And it's like everybody else who's ever jumped on a diet and said, this is just how I'm going to eat forever. You get burnt out, you go back to what you were doing, and you gain all the weight back, which is what ended up happening. And another thing I had here was it was kind of interesting to see. I think it was the producer JD Roth. He was making a lot of cover your ass statements. He's like, to the best of my knowledge, I had no idea what was going on. And he was talking about the caffeine pill incident. And that is the big controversy in this episode, where like we get into the caffeine pills and they talk to the doctors, and the doctors make it real clear. Like, when you jack up caffeine, and you're exposing yourself to these extreme circumstances with the excessive exercise, it's going to stress out your heart a lot. It opens you up for things like potentially like having a stroke, or like something massive, or a heart attack, or something that can come from jacking your heart rate up through using a caffeine pill. And a lot of times when people do jump on diets, they'll use caffeine pills or energy drinks or other stuff as a band-aid for things like poor sleep, stress, deficiencies, overtraining. And this is why the doc made it really clear, no caffeine, because this stuff is a giant risk. And Jillian refused to listen to the doctor and even defended her actions, saying, I personally believe that having a caffeine pill as a supplement is healthier than abusing endless coffee. And you can make an argument, yes, because total caffeine consumption, probably, honestly, it would have been a better situation, because on top of that, coffee is also a diuretic, so it would have affected their fluid levels. But caffeine in itself shouldn't have been part of the equation. It's like, yeah, this would have been better, but it shouldn't have been an option. Okay. Because when you're in these extreme circumstances, you want to be doing as many things right as possible to reduce risk for serious injury. And then we get to a point where we see one of the contestants that took it way too far, Rachel Fredrickson. Like, you saw her, she looked emaciated to that point, and to the point where Bob and Jillian were like, oh my God. And it's like, yeah, congrats. This is exactly what you have been pushing these people towards. And they acted like they were horrified. They're like, how could this happen? It's like, this is exactly what would happen if people didn't fight you on exactly what you were telling them to do. So when people are saying, oh, I can't go anymore in the gym, or they have some of that temptation food, that actually probably did them very good as far as from a metabolic standpoint. You want to make sure that when you're on your journey, you have these periods where your body gets to chill out, because if you just gun it pedal to the metal and you get to this point where it goes too far, like you see someone like Rachel Fredrickson, like you can see how emaciated she looks, and you can almost guarantee she lost a lot of muscle mass. She probably lost a lot of bone mineral density. Like, how do we know that she might not be at risk for things like sarcopenia or osteopenia, which carry huge risks down the line? And this is unfortunately what happens to these people when they are not guided by true professionals that understand these things. And then what else did I have on here? Shedding light. Oh boy. This one was like the cap on it all. And they kept bringing it up. And they're like, well, this shedded light on the epidemic that was going on right under our noses. Yeah. Okay. Like, a bunch of people have a bunch of excess body fat and they just don't know about it. No, we were well aware. We didn't need a TV show to tell us that. And they doubled down in saying, well, the game worked. No one created this opportunity for accountability. I would not call this accountability. I would call this shaming and making everybody have a negative relationship with food and exercise as a massive failure in the grand scheme of things. And the fact that they're still defending it to this day is just It blows my mind. It really does, especially with all these people that have come out and talked about it. It's just nuts. They showed the percentages at the end of the documentary where it said 32% of Americans were classified as obese when the show aired in the early 2000s. And in 2025, the obesity rate is now 45%. So almost 1 in 2 people in America is classified as obese. Now, is the show to blame for this? No, but it definitely didn't do anything to help. It exploited and profited off of these people that were struggling. It didn't help them. It set unrealistic expectations, not just for them, but for all of America and the whole world too, because this thing went international. It hurt people's mental health as far as their relationship with exercise, their relationship with themselves, and understanding what realistic expectations look like, what giving yourself grace looks like, how it should be throughout their journey towards trying to improve their health. And it just was a shitstorm. And I cannot believe they're still actually defending it. Then we get to Bob's heart attack. Okay. A doctor in the gym saved him, but he wouldn't listen to the docs on the show. And this highlights an important issue because a lot of times people will talk shit on doctors. They will, for lack of a better term, punch up, and they'll say, oh, doctors suck. They do this, they do that. But then you have a heart attack. It's like, get me a doctor. It's like, no, you can't have both. You need to understand that there are people that are experts in certain fields. And when it comes to your health and when it comes to medicine, doctors are the top of the top that we rely on. And it's okay to rely on experts for things that we don't have the same depth of understanding. So luckily, Bob had one in his corner, even though he was battling back and forth with Dr. H all the time on the show, trying to lower people's calories because he was convinced he knew more. Okay. I'm not saying that it's comparable to a heart attack or anything like that. I'm just saying it can't go both ways where you trust them sometimes, don't trust them other times. And along with that, right after that, Tracy shared a story about how she went to Weight Watchers meetings when she was 10 with her grandma. And basically, Weight Watchers meetings, I hope they've gotten better over time, but I doubt it. But it's basically people going around in a circle and talking about how they don't like certain parts of their bodies. And I'm sure that there's also like positive coaching and things that go along with that too. But regardless of how much better or worse it's gotten, a 10-year-old should never be in a fucking room where they're talking about body image, where they're talking about their nutrition and trying to lose weight. It should never happen, because kids should not be part of this conversation. When it comes to understanding what to talk about with kids around nutrition, around exercise, it needs to come from a place of how it fuels your body. When we're talking about food, I love Jordan Syatt. If you're not following him yet, you should be. He's got incredible exercise videos for kids on his YouTube. And along with that, he has great takes when it comes to understanding how to have the conversation with your kids, because he has a little 2-year-old right now. He's got another 1-year-old, I believe. And when it comes to the way he explains it, food is tied to being able to do things. So for example, when his daughter was able to hang on the bars at the playground for a long time, she's like, oh, Daddy, look how long I was able to do that. And he goes, yeah, that was awesome. You know why you were able to? Because you ate those foods before, like the watermelon and the potatoes. Those helped you do that, because they do. Okay. That's the fuel that you use. And when it comes to measuring stuff on the scale, it's not, oh, mommy has to eat this many calories because she's trying to lose weight. It's no, I need to know what I need to fuel my body properly. Putting stuff on a scale should be no different than measuring stuff out for a baking recipe. It's like, oh, I need a cup of flour. Okay, boom, done. But then all of a sudden we put it on a scale because we're trying to understand how many calories we have in something, and all of a sudden it's disordered, even though you're able to do the other thing with no problem. Makes zero sense. Stuff like that really needs to be taken into account when talking with kids, because we don't want them eating protein so it'll help them lose weight. We want them eating protein because it'll fuel their muscles. It'll help them recover from their sports games and their practices. We don't want them eating complex carbs because it'll fill you up and make you feel less hungry so you don't eat so much. No, it's because it'll help them feel energy, because carbs give you a lot of energy, not just for your muscles, but also your brain. So it helps you in school. We have healthy fats, not because, again, it helps fill you up and it's better than these bad fats because they're toxic for you. No, we eat these things because it helps keep your body regular as far as your hormones are concerned, if you want to have that conversation with them. Or you just say it's just healthy for you and it helps you feel your best throughout the day. And going at it from a health focused perspective, not, oh, we do this to control our weight or we do this to burn calories. Okay. That's the thing that really needs to be understood when it comes to kids and this conversation. And with all that being said, I will say sometimes, like when I've had conversations with my own clients, when we're having our Zoom monthly meetings, sometimes their kids are in the room, and sometimes they will say stuff that does get into that murky territory because we're working through it. Like we're understanding this is where we're at and this is where we want to get to, and we need to work on the mentality side of things. So I would say if you're able to, because honestly, it happens a lot in the car because they're driving kids to wherever. But if you're able to, in the beginning of your journey, when you're working on your mental side of this whole thing and understanding the self-sabotaging behaviors we talked about and everything I just mentioned, it can help to not include your kids in the beginning until you get a good understanding about it. So you can impart the wisdom at the end of the journey rather than impart the struggles at the beginning of the journey. So that way they only get all the benefits, because we're setting up that next generation. We're giving them that generational wealth. You need to give them all the good stuff. What else do we have here? Ozempic. I forgot they went into that. Okay. And when it comes to Ozempic, there is no one else who has made up the most lies based on their own bullshit bias about these GLP-1 medications than Jillian Michaels. Okay. I actually asked, ChatGPT if they could find me all the false claims, and there were a lot, but we'll name a couple and just kind of go through these fast. Number one is you can never get off these drugs. You'll gain all the weight back and then some, 2/3 of it within the first year. Well, turns out that's not true. And there's a population of people that can come off these drugs that are able to impart the habits that they have worked on while on these medications, because they no longer have the food noise and they've been able to get to a place where, hey, now I can make those changes I want to make, which got them into a healthier place metabolically, which now allows them to make those same decisions even without the medication. So there are people that are able to do that. It's not a blanket statement. That's why blanket statements never hold up no matter what you're talking about. Number two, it will stop working around the 18-month to 2-year mark. Well, we've been going at this for a few years right about now, and that's not the case. People are still losing weight. People are still using it, and it's still effective. So there's some bullshit. Number three, it's not meant for weight loss. It was cleared by the FDA for type 2 diabetes, not for weight loss. Well, they actually did clear it for weight loss, and that's why we have Wegovy instead of Ozempic. So when you have a name change like that for the exact same compound, it's usually due to that, because it's an insurance thing and they want to differentiate it when it comes to claims and things like that. So yeah, it's covered for just weight loss, even though there is a long list of criteria that people do need to meet to be a candidate for these medications. So it's not just that, even though it can be, because that's where having a conversation with your doctor comes into play, not just listening to everything that comes out of Jillian Michaels' mouth. Number four, Ozempic face isn't from rapid weight loss. Yes, it is. Okay. It's from the fast, rapid weight loss. This happens in every part of your body. When you lose it really, really fast, that's where a lot of loose skin happens. And honestly, most people are still going to have loose skin anyway, but it's exaggerated when it happens rapidly. Your body does not like doing this really fast. Number five, emphasizing cancer warnings as if risk were established in humans. Turns out those cancer warnings came from rat studies. And then when they went, because rat studies are preliminary studies, and then they go into the human trials. And when they did the human trials, they found out, hey, not the case. That's why we have multiple levels of this. You can't take rat studies and say this applies to humans until we actually test humans and we see what the deal is, because here, not the case. Implying GLP-1s uniquely cause severe muscle loss. It's not the GLP-1s, it's the reduced caloric intake, which they were actually doing on the show. So they were doing exactly what these GLP-1s are doing, and they didn't even realize it, which is very sad, very sad. The muscle loss comes from underfueling your body, and for a lot of people also not prioritizing strength training and protein. So if you are strength training at least 2 to 4 times a week for at least 20 minutes and prioritizing using more weights and more reps over time, if you are consuming adequate protein, which for most people is about 0. 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body mass, or if you have the ability to measure your lean body mass, about 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. If you're getting that on the daily, you will most likely not have to deal with that, assuming that your total calorie intake is in a relatively good range. Overstating severe GI risks as if they're common, because in actuality, when it comes to things like stomach paralysis and things like that, they are extremely rare and most likely are happening in conjunction with extreme approaches like fasting, for example, while also on GLP-1 medications. If you caught my episodes with Dr. Gabby Gerbino, we talk about this at length, where these medications slow down food motility. So now they're slowing down your digestive system, and you're not giving your digestive system any reason to do anything. And all of a sudden, those muscles atrophy and they lose functionality, and you wonder why. It's because we're doing these extreme things, not just that medication doing it. And there were many, many others, but those were the top ones that I was able to find. And another thing I wanted to touch on too, because this is a big thing I learned when I was a young trainer and got to realize it over the years, is that there's many different types of health. Because when we're looking at a show like this and these trainers are like, I am fit, I am successful, I am all these things. Okay, just because somebody is fit, just because somebody is in shape, that doesn't mean that they are healthy in all aspects of their life. Because physical health, yes, that is one, but there's also financial health, spiritual health, how healthy your family dynamic is, how healthy your work relationship with work is, how healthy your connection to your community, charity, and service is. Because I know when I was younger, I was like, oh, I'm fit, I'm awesome. But guess what? I have this person in front of me who does struggle with their weight, but they are way more charitable with their time and their money than I could ever hope to be. They are the world's best parent. They've never missed a single thing that their kid has ever done because they are so dedicated to seeing their kids grow up and being present. That's another form of dedication as well. So it doesn't just happen in the gym, it happens in other areas of life. And the issue is that we need to take all of these positive things that we are able to do in our lives that we prioritize, and we need to figure out how to transition that into these other areas that we may be lacking in. So like, for example, that person who is super dedicated to their kids and seeing them grow up and being able to be the best parent they can be. Okay, they are dedicated. Now, what can we take from that aspect and put it towards fitness? Like, okay, you really prioritize going to your kids' things. So you put it on the schedule. You make sure that it's in that calendar and you know you're going to be there. Cool. Let's do that with your workouts. Okay. It should be that simple of a, oh, okay, cool. I'll do that as well. Or let's say when it comes to your kid and when they were younger, they didn't want to brush their teeth. Okay. And you're telling them you still got to brush your teeth. All right. Awesome. So you are able to tell your kid, hey, I know you don't want to do this, but you still need to do it anyway. And you hold them accountable. Now, do that with yourself. When you feel like not doing the thing, treat yourself as another one of your kids and say, hey, I know we don't want to do this, but we got to do it anyway. Just like brushing your teeth, or when they didn't want to go to school, or when they didn't want to do anything that you knew would be good for them. Okay, same goes for you. You just got to translate it over in a way that makes sense and you are able to do. All right. What else? The relatability around the struggles, I think, was probably one of the biggest things. The benefits from the show was people sharing their real stories, like the actual contestants being vulnerable and letting it all go and just telling people how it is. Because when you can understand where people are coming from, that's the first step in understanding how to help and what needs to be done and what can be addressed. So it helps to get the whole picture when you're looking at your journey. And they were also focusing on things they couldn't do before. Like the one woman, I believe her name was Stacy, in the NYPD officer, she kept talking about all these things that she couldn't do before, but now she could. And that's a non-scale victory. That's awesome. And, or no, actually, I think this was Tracy. And Tracy also had a great quote at the end where she said, I don't need anyone to cheer for me. And this happens when people on their journey are searching for compliments. They're searching for people to help them along their journey. But sometimes that's just not going to happen. Okay, you might not be fortunate enough to have an awesome best friend or family member to cheer you on. Maybe you have a spouse that is not just not super supportive of you. Maybe they're making life harder. Okay. You need to see what your circumstances are, what your life looks like, and say, hey, do I have support? And if not, I'm all I need. I can do this all myself, but I just need to learn what needs to be done. So that, like, seek out help from professionals. But at the end of the day, when it comes to executing and doing the things that need to be done, just know you are enough to get the job done. You are enough to do what's required, because you don't need anybody to cheer for you. Okay. Their cheers are an added bonus. Like, it's awesome hearing that from somebody like, oh, did you lose weight? It's great hearing that, but that can't be what you rely on. That can't be your fuel. It's got to come from within. It's got to be your journey and you loving yourself and you saying, I'm taking my health as a priority. I'm making my health a priority and I matter. And that's going to be the most powerful muscle that you can build throughout this entire thing. Okay. And that's all I've got as far as my notes on The Biggest Loser documentary. I know I went off in a million different directions, and I hope that you were able to stick with me and get a little something out of it and apply something to your own journey. And that was actually a whole lot of fun to do. I'm not going to lie, just like hashing through ideas and being able to go in all these directions that sometimes I'm not able to bring up in normal podcasts because they're a little bit more focused and dialed in. But yeah, I really hope that this was beneficial for everybody who listened. Now, if you haven't already, be sure to go ahead and download your free copy of the Toned in 20 workouts and get on my email list. So that way you get more helpful tips like this and you're able to do the workouts. Maybe if you haven't been doing anything up to this point, getting like 2 of those, maybe even just one of those throughout the week can make a big, big difference. And if you heard all of this and you're feeling really motivated and inspired and you're like, I want to do this, like I want to really take that big first step in my journey, then you're in luck, because that's what my First 5 program is all about. Okay. It's 1 month, $97. You learn everything that you need to learn to lose weight sustainably, all the strategies to dial in your nutrition, to stay consistent with your exercise, and to learn the mindset strategies that I've been alluding to throughout this entire thing, where you learn how to get out of the all or nothing mindset. You learn how to appreciate all these non-scale victories and all these good things happening. So it's a productive and positive and encouraging and empowering journey that you are starting and that you are going to continue for months and years. So you're in such a better place going forward. All right. So if you want to check all that out, all the details are down in the description, in the show notes. Just give the link a click and it'll take you right to it, tell you all about it. All right. That's it for today. Thank you again so much for making it all the way through. I'll see you next time for the next episode. But until then, go kick some ass. Bye-bye.